We are talking about election night in America. I don't say the results were shocking in the sense of who won. I think those were not necessarily predetermined, but we all talked about them. It seemed like the elections went the way they were going to go. However, Will brought up the percentage and the percentiles of those votes are very different. Still, almost 50% voted against him in the state, just when you break down Cuomo and Sliwa. However, I still don't think it was enough to necessarily get him over. It would have mattered either way.
It would not have, because he got 50.4% of the vote. So he did get over that 50% threshold, even if every other independent candidate and every other vote and then the 3,000 people that voted for Eric Adams still coalesced, it would not have gotten another candidate over that margin of victory to win. So it was a resounding victory for him in the sense that there was no questions.
Yeah.
You can't point to it and say the three-way race with Sliwa and Cuomo really changed the outcome of that race.
Maybe one of the more interesting things was not that a Democrat won New York. It is if we look at the other elections that were happening, Will, and how, again, not necessarily the results were that shocking, but by how big?
Right. Well, because these were touted as close races. In New Jersey, where Jack Ciattarelli was kind of insurgent against Mickey Sherrill, where they thought that this could be an opportunity, especially if the margin of vote was similar to what it was in the presidential election, then we would see maybe an upset here. Instead, the Democrat won by 13%. So even the polling that had it showing within 10, within 5, was way off in the actual vote count.
But I know we want to hear from President Trump about this as well, because President Trump weighed in on the election results last night. Now, what's interesting is a lot of people are saying, I was watching all the coverage, this is a referendum on President Trump. I do kind of look at President Trump and go, does he care? Does he go, you know what? I won. I'm term limited. I'm not really a Republican or Democrat at this point. I am my own thing. I am Donald Trump, and I'm out in 2 years. So you know what? I'm going to do still what I want to do. I feel like that's probably more where he leads. But let's hear from President Trump.
Last night, it was, not expected to be a victory. It was very Democrat areas, but I don't think it was good for Republicans. I don't think it was good. I'm not sure it was good for anybody. But we had an interesting evening, and we learned a lot.
Interesting evening, learned a lot. I think one of the things you also learned, especially in New York City, is how about we run some candidates people want to vote for. You ran a Republican who no one really wanted to vote for, seemed like a good guy, but, it was a bit more too old school. And then you ran Andrew Cuomo, who, again, I think would have done a good job as mayor, but comes with so much baggage, including that baggage from President Trump, saying how horrible this guy was for many, many years. That's not going to help out. Now, if you could look at the one positive sign, it was the largest independent vote for an independent candidate, I believe, in American, since really the two-party system.
Right.
The most people voted for an independent candidate. That is pretty wild to think about in terms of just pure numbers. And maybe that is a good sign towards a referendum on the two parties.
Well, and when you look at also that race, that was the most amount of ballots cast for a mayoral election in New York since 1969. 2 million ballots were cast for the mayoral race. That is, as I said, almost 75 years. We're looking at a very long time since that many votes were cast in a mayoral election. So it was a huge turnout that is reflective in both votes for an independent candidate as well as the win for Mamdani. And then you look, though, across the board. And what President Trump was getting at is that we learned a lot. He mentioned two things specifically. One was that the government shutdown, clearly Republicans are being blamed for. And he also said a lot of people have said that my name wasn't on the ballot. Now, that is probably will not be again, we can assume. So Republicans,
Trump?
Yes.
Okay.
Republicans and conservatives need to figure out the way forward. And if there's a dismissiveness about the victory of someone like Mamdani in New York, of just like, that's a socialist, whatever, and there's not a real urge to coalesce and combat things like that, you're not going to learn a lesson, and the midterms are going to be dire. Even though we look at the Democrat Party and we say there's no unity, no leadership. They're not going to be able to get anything done, and you take that for granted. It's going to be the one-off candidates. It's going to be the swing districts that are going to flip, and that is going to lead to a flip in the House of Representatives. So you also look at a place like Virginia, where it got close at times, and then it got spread apart as far as the polling. It was kind of all over the map. But Spanberger ended up winning by 14.6%. So that was not even remotely close. And they have an incumbent governor that's a Republican. And the lieutenant governor incumbent was blown out of the water by the Democrat who won that election last night. That, coupled with the fact that Jay Jones, the Attorney General elect now of Virginia, won by 6%. So even though he had all that terrible stuff about wanting to kill a political opponent or wishing harm on a political opponent and the children of that political opponent, not 25 years ago or when he was in high school and posted it on Twitter, but just a couple years ago, he still won by 6% of the vote. Now, I think a lot of that, you can look to Virginia and say, what do they have a lot of? Federal workers. What is going on right now? As of today, the longest government shutdown in American history. And while we know the truth, that it's the obstructionist Democrats in the Senate that will not let it go through, I think this does tell us that the voting public is currently blaming Republicans more than they are Democrats, especially in a state like Virginia.
Let's say at least in those areas. And you try to have conversations with people. And, of course, a lot of this falls in party lines and in the media you decide to consume. And that media will tell you one way or the other. And you have a lot of people go, oh, I didn't know that. Maybe I need to go take a look at what you're talking about here, because Will's right. It is that. I also think you have a state like New Jersey, it's got some big ports, some of the biggest ports in the country, dealing with the tariff situation.
Right.
These are economic decisions. These are where those decisions do start to impact where you vote, because they're talking about actual people's dollars and cents, human beings that are dealing with it, not just our global fight against China or whatever it may be. You are talking about a tariff battle that maybe we're not hearing a lot about as much anymore, but still affecting human beings. It's affecting human beings in particularly these states. And I'd say New Jersey is one of the big ones there.
New Jersey, you also think Virginia because of Norfolk, huge port there, and obviously New York. These are states that are affected heavily by things like tariffs. You also then look to California, because we talked about Prop 50. This is where Gavin Newsom tried to subvert California law by putting a ballot initiative to put aside their independent districting committee within California, which is there by law, because they took it away from the leadership of the government and put it in this quasi-independent board that decides it. Prop 50 won last night by 27.6%. And that is even with a lot of Democrats publicly in polls saying, no, I like the independent board we have. It's still got 63.8% yes on Governor Gavin Newsom's plan to have a one-off redistricting to combat President Trump.
Yeah, that was the one that was, I'd say, purely Trump adjacent.
And as well, you also know that's 2028 adjacent, because this was a big victory for Gavin Newsom as he makes his push to the White House in 2028. If he failed at this, he is way set back when it comes to running for president. Now he's got the wind at his back, and he's going to think that he has a mandate and an agenda to move forward and change the country into Gavin Newsom's image.